My name is Bill Swantner. These videos are just what I consider the highlights, the important sections, or the important things to know in each of the chapters. There are so many details in the chapter that if I did all of that, basically just read the book. This is just touching on the highlights. This is chapter 2. This is the second half of chapter 2. The first video was this slide right here. It looked at the focus of Earthkind landscape in the approach and what Earthkind encourages. This second half of the chapter, this video is going to focus on the Earthkind principles. And again, these principles are the basis for understanding gardening in the state of Texas. So they're listed there. Let's take a look at it. Plan and design. First off is the spacing of plants. We like immediate satisfaction. You go to theme parks or you go to the botanical gardens or maybe a city garden and you see this flush of color. Well, they have professional horticulturists and they have people on staff who will keep up with those plants on a regular basis. We're looking at a low maintenance approach to landscaping. And so if the tag on the plant says 2 feet, it means 2 feet. What we need to do is give the plant space. If the plants are too close together, the leaves rub against each other and they can create wounds where they rub. Also, if this plant is infected with an insect or disease and it rubs up against this plant, they are both now infected with the disease. Placement of the plants. Full sun, part shade, full sun, full shade, whatever it may be. If you look at turf grass, I was at a property and the person said, well, we have zoysia because zoysia is more shade tolerant. Well, there's no grass. And I said, more shade tolerant than what? Zoysia is more shade tolerant than Bermuda, but that's not saying anything. Bermuda is not any shade tolerant. Zoysia is not more shade tolerant than palmetto, St. Augustine. So the placement of the plants. The north side of the house versus the south side of the house. The south side of the house in San Antonio is going to get very hot. The north side of the house is going to be vulnerable for those north winds coming in. Is the sun reflecting off the driveway because that's hot? The concrete is hot. And so what plants are you going to put right there? If they're sun or heat sensitive, bad place to put them. Then hydrozoning, that's where you group plants together. Mexican mint marigold likes full sun and like it dry. Ferns tend to like it moist and shady. You don't put those two things together. So hydrozoning means knowing your plant and putting them where other plants are like light requirements and like watering requirements. And then plant diversity. In my area of San Antonio, we have a lot of oak trees. We're known for our oak trees. One of the subdivisions out here has the oak tree as their logo, and they're beautiful. These are beautiful live oaks. The problem is that oak wilt got introduced into the area. And live oaks, let me try to draw a really lousy picture of tree here. There's a live oak tree. Here's a live oak tree. They connect with the roots underground. So if this tree gets infected, it will infect this tree. Live oak wilt travels at about 75 feet a year, depending on the weather conditions. And so we have seen how the initial introduction of oak wilt has spread going 2 ways. And some of us are working with the Forestry Service here in Texas, tracking the spread of oak wilt. If we would have had a live oak tree, and this is a crepe myrtle tree, and over here we had a cedar elm tree. Well, the oak wilt is going to affect this tree. The other trees will be left alone. So that's the idea behind plant diversity. Rain gardens. Rain gardens are depressions in the ground. So I live on a slope, so the slope goes down like this. What I did at the bottom of the slope was I made a depression. I put a little berm. And then this area down here is well amended soil. It has expanded shale in it. It has a lot of manure-based compost in it. When it rains, rather than creating a swamp, the water just filters right through that. So rain gardens are a possibility. Water conservation, as I said, hydrozoning, which I've already mentioned, is putting plants together of similar light requirements. Energy conservation, which was in the first presentation, putting trees and wind shrubs for windbreaks in the right direction. Practical turf area. There are some people who despise turf. They'll say, well, turf grass is a water waster. Turf grass doesn't waste water. Turf grass doesn't require a lot of water. My front yard, I have not watered in 2 years. It's not perfect. There are some brown spots, but those brown spots, one, are from the winter grass that has died. In the spring, it looked beautiful because the winter grass was okay. But when it started getting hot, the winter grass died. So there are some brown spots. We've had a decent amount of rain this year. The St. Augustine is spreading. Is it perfect? No. Is it functional? Oh, it's very functional. From the street, it looks like a beautiful lawn. I haven't watered. I don't use pesticides. I don't use herbicides. I don't use anything on it. Anyway, getting off track. Turf grass it has been proved, cool the surrounding air by 30 degrees because the soil and the turf grass absorb the sun's rays. Compare that to a front yard full of rocks because we don't want grass. Water grass is a water waster. So we put rocks there. The rocks get hit by that sun. The rocks start acting like an oven, and any tree roots below those rocks are going to start getting cooked. And the sun is going to reflect off those rocks. And after it warms them up, it's going to reflect into your house. Turf grass can keep the air around the area 30 degrees cooler. Turf grass will catch rain, and it will allow the rain to soak through if we have well amended soil. Turf grass selection. Does it want full sun? How much water does it need? The shape of the turf area. If you try to design a golf course for your house and your turf grass looks, like this, that's hard to water. I mean, unless you have a built-in sprinkler system, how are you going to water that? And so a more sensible approach might be to have a rectangle or a square area, because if you water it with a sprinkler that you put on, you could set the sprinkler here and it can cover this area. Put the sprinkler here or here, and it'll cover this area. So practical shapes of the turf grass. And then the final one is soil depth. This is really kind of fascinating. I ran a scenario through a computer program. I asked it, if I had 1 inch of rain fall in 1 hour onto a soil depth of 2 inches of our heavy clay soil. And so the variables were 1 inch of rain, 1 hour, 2 inches of a heavy clay soil. How much of that rainfall will be absorbed and how much of it will be runoff? And the program said that in 2 inches of clay soil, 5% of it is absorbed, 95% runoff. I ran through a second scenario. 1 inch of rain hitting the ground at 1 inch of rain in 1 hour and 5 inches of heavy clay soil. And the computer program said, well, you'll have about 10% absorbed, 90% is going to run off. I said, let me do this one more time. If I have 5 inches of well-amended soil, compost, well-amended soil added over a period of time, 1 inch of rain in 1 hour, how much of it will be absorbed and how much will be run off? And the answer was 100% would be absorbed. There is no runoff. One of the reasons I don't water my front yard is because the soil is around 5 to 6 inches deep. And what happens is the water is protected deep in the bottom part of the soil. So practical turf grass is good. It cleans the water. It can harvest the water, avoids erosion with soil. You need the right turf grass, the right area, but we need to get a soil depth about 5 inches. And we're going to talk more about turf in a different presentation. Soil analysis. Get your soil tested. Find out what micronutrients you might be missing, kind of get a feel for it. But I can tell you that in this area, we have a heavy clay soil. It's going to be a high pH. And if you do your research on high pH, that means that iron will not be absorbed into the plants very efficiently. We need a special iron for this area, and it's 5 initials. It's hard to find. E, D, D, H, A. That, if you can read that, sorry, that is the soil I'm sorry, that is the iron supplement that we need in this area. Um, just a regular bag of soil of iron supplement may work. It's expensive, but and I'll go into it later on a different presentation. Our high pH, it just binds the soil, the iron to the soil, and it can't get to the plants. And our soil is not very efficient at using phosphorus. So that's what you're going to find out. So the number one answer to everything gardening in South Texas, South Central Texas, is add compost. And we'll get into what compost does later on. But we're talking about soil analysis, the preparation, add compost. Then mulch. Mulch, it will protect flower beds and vegetable beds. Mulch is not made for turf grass. People get compost and mulch kind of confused. So let me set it up for you with my great drawing here. Here's your soil. Compost works with the soil. What compost does is it feeds the nutrients, it feeds the microbes in the soil, and it changes the structure. And we'll go into this more later on, but I'm trying to get these two separated because people get compost and mulch confused. Compost goes into the soil, makes the soil better. Mulch goes on top of the soil to protect the soil. So compost goes in, mulch goes on top. All right, let's see what happens here. Selecting the right plants, the right location, the right soil. For South Central Texas, especially with our changing weather, some people call it climate change. I'll just say changing weather. We really need to get plants that are more drought and heat tolerant. Last year we had, I don't know, 50 days of 100 plus degree temperatures, and not a lot of plants do well. This year it's not bad. A lot of plants have wilted, but there's a lot of color. The Pride of Barbados is blooming. The Esperanzas are blooming. The fire bushes are blooming. The some of the lantanas are doing quite well. The plumbagos are doing well. The bougainvillea is doing well. We can have color without much water, and these tolerate the heat. So let's go through. Really, there's 3 categories of plants here. Earthkind. You go type in your browser, TAMU, Earthkind Plant Selector, and that'll take you to a website. You can pick a region of the state. You can pick out a specific zip code and ask what plants grow here. These Earthkind tend to be bush trees and shrubs, tend to be. Then the next one is really native and well adapted. Texas Superstar. Those are plants that Texas has, that A&M has trialed throughout the state of Texas, as far away as Overton and Lubbock, and here in San Antonio, College Station, Uvalde, and they grow well throughout the state. And so they are called Texas Superstars. Earthkind, as I said, tends to focus on trees and bushes, native and well adapted. Will be trees and bushes, but also perennials. Texas Superstar is a broader program. It includes annuals, it includes fruit trees, includes vegetables. Anyway, there's your plant selection. We'll talk more about this in another presentation. We're looking at irrigation and rain capture. Efficient irrigation reduces water waste, eliminates water runoff. It can prevent overwatering, which can lead to plant damage, and we really encourage the use of drip irrigation. It reduces water waste. I can't tell you how many times I've driven through the neighborhood. It's raining outside and someone has their sprinkler system on. That is wasting water. The turf grass isn't wasting water. The person is. Eliminate water runoff. Efficient irrigation, just because it worked 20 years ago, doesn't mean it works today. And sometimes the sprinklers are doing a wonderful job of watering the streets and cars, but the grass is suffering. So efficient irrigation means paying attention to the irrigation system, where the water is going, preventing overwatering, which can lead to plant damage. It is August the 9th in 2024, and our evening temperatures in the high 70s. And we've been told we can water at night? Well, if we water our turf grass at night, especially St. Augustine, I think Bermuda, we'll get to grasses later on. If that is wet overnight, it creates the environment for disease to grow, fungus to grow. So we get take all root rot, we can get large patch because we're watering, overwatering at the wrong time of day. And then drip irrigation because it minimizes the water on leaves. The wet leaves can encourage fungus and it reduces weed problems. When you water your turf grass or your beds with your sprinklers, you're also watering the weeds. So if you have a drip irrigation system, you're putting the water exactly at the base of that plant, and you're not watering all the weed seeds around it. Rain capture, I mentioned the water rain capture guards earlier. Capturing rain off of your roof through a gutter system into a cistern, a rain barrel, and you can buy those any number of size. You can get them as low as 50 gallons. You can get them multiple thousands of gallons. The efficient use of mulches. Remember, I said that the mulch sits on top of the soil. And what it does is it protects the sun, protects the soil from the heat, the wind, it keeps moisture down there, and it minimizes weed damage. I did an experiment in my yard. It was July a couple of years back. It was 96 degrees outside. I went to the backyard, put a soil probe, soil thermometer into the soil, bare soil, and it was about 94 degrees. I went to the other part of the yard where it has mulch, and the temperature was 84. 10-degree temperature difference, same time of day, everything. The only difference one had mulch, which was keeping the soil temperature down. The other one had the soil exposed to the sun, kicked the temperature up. David Rodriguez, who's the horticulture agent for Bexar County and probably one of the best you're going to come across, has a rule of thumb called 2-2-2. You apply mulch 2 times a year. You apply mulch 2 inches deep, and you keep the mulch 2 inches away from the plant. So here's your plant, the stem of your plant. If you have mulch up against it, the mulch is encouraging that stem to stay wet. It's encouraging microbes and other little critters to chew at that stem, and it weakens the plant. One thing I do not understand, I don't get it. These guys, these tree places, the landscapers, they'll put trees up and then they will put all this mulch around it, forming like a little pyramid. And that's the worst, one of the worst things, not the worst, one of the worst things you can do to a tree. Because you have your tree growing here, and I'm going to rant for a minute. You have your tree growing here, then you put this cone of stuff there. And inside this cone are little critters that are eating at the bark. This mound of stuff is keeping this super wet. That bark is meant to be dry. I don't know if they think it's cool or if they read something on the internet said, hey, here's one way to kill a tree without trying. So David's rule of thumb is twice a year, you'll put 2 inches of mulch and you keep the mulch 2 inches away from the stem of the plant. And if you're planting a tree, you keep that away from the root flare. Anyway, there are organic mulches. Organic mulches will decay in time when they will improve the soil. There's native and non-native. Native simply means the mulch is from here. It's going to be crepe myrtles and cedar elms and oak trees. I'm looking around my yard. Non-native means they're going to bring in stuff from Houston and Colorado. It's going to have pine needles, and we don't really need that here. People may like the look, but we encourage the use of native plants, native mulch. There's single and there's double shredded. When they take your trees, they send them through a grinder, and it'll throw out chunks maybe this big, even bigger, but then it'll make smaller pieces. That's single shredded. Double shredded means they take the ground stuff and they'll send it through another shredder. Some people do triple shredded. Ideally, and they all serve a different purpose, but ideally you get double shredded because it's more absorbent and the microbes can eat it a little easier, and that's a separate presentation. You will come across living mulch or composted mulch. Living mulch or composted mulch is a combination of mulch and compost. It's a 2-in-1 product. Again, we'll talk about that later on. Inorganic mulches, rocks, rubber, plastic. Rocks, they may look pretty. They heat up the soil and they'll reflect heat onto the house, and they do nothing for the soil. Maybe in about 200,000 years, they will dissolve, become part of the soil. Rubber, it serves no real purpose. It may look pretty, but when you get tired of it, you can't put it into the soil. So you end up throwing it in the landfill. And same thing with plastic. It's not going to be friendly to the earth. And this is earth kind landscaping. Plastic is not friendly to the landscaping. So when you don't use it, you're going to end up tearing it up. And that includes these weed claws. A lot of them, people get tired of them. They have to dig them up and throw them away. And then finally, appropriate maintenance. Pruning. The number one reason to prune trees is safety. It's up against a power line. It's hanging over a car, hanging over a house, and you need to cut that. The second reason to prune a tree is for structural reason. If you have limbs rubbing up against each other, it's going to create a wound. Other than that, it's aesthetics, and people turn their beautiful oak trees and it look like a poodle, and that's not healthy for the tree. But people do what they got to do. But appropriate maintenance is pruning them correctly. And this is August. The salvias can be pruned back so that we can maybe get some summer growth because right now the mystic spires getting so heavy they're falling to the ground. Appropriate maintenance includes monitoring the irrigation. Is your sprinkler system doing what you said that you wanted it to do? If you have a sprinkler that you put in the lawn, is a watering the area you thought, or is wind blowing it from the southeast and you're watering your neighbor's yard? Appropriate maintenance means to keep up with the mowing. Don't let it get too high. Also, we'll talk about this more in the turf grass chapter. Mowing grass at the correct height. St. Augustine likes to be mowed high because the height protects the stolon sitting on top of the ground. St. Bermuda and Zoysia get mowed lower because it encourages better root growth. Anyway, so we'll talk about appropriate maintenance. We'll talk about mowing later. And then using chemicals as directed. If you get a bag that says it'll take care of 4,000 square feet and you've got a 3,500 square foot yard, it doesn't mean, well, I have 500 left, I'll just throw it out there. The bag means 4,000 square feet. It doesn't mean 2,000 square feet once or 1,000 square feet four times. It's 4,000 square feet means it's going to be 4,000 square feet. Use the chemicals as directed. The biggest problem with using chemicals is people don't follow the label. So just a reminder, this chapter and these last two videos, earth-kind gardening or landscape is the foundation for understanding how to be a great gardener in the state of Texas. We can have beautiful landscapes that don't require much maintenance. They're environmentally friendly. They include both traditional and organic approaches. It's water sensitive. It reduces the need of chemicals. It helps with energy conservation, reduces the garbage in the landfill. So what does difference make? And this is something that I'll have at the end of the chapters because there's so many chapters and I couldn't figure out how to make them all work. So I'm doing this. Why does it matter? And I call it connecting the dots. Basically, earth-kind gardening comes down to getting the correct soil and the correct plant in the correct location. You'll have fewer chemicals, fewer pests, less water, less maintenance, and you will have that beautiful landscape that we all search for. All right. I hope this helps.